Hi everyone, my name is Lauren Tuiskula and I'm a graduating senior at Amherst College. Throughout this presentation, there will be blank slides, but they are intentional and meant for you to focus on what I'm saying as opposed to being distracted by what's on the screen, so don't be alarmed when they do pop up. And with that, I'll get started. So, my 5 College Stage project also served as my senior thesis project this year. With my thesis, I took a digital approach to study Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's Americana. The project is titled Digital Adichie, Identity, Diaspora, and Transmedia Practice, and within it, I use a website form to analyze the text, employing tools like WordPress and Twine to carry out this work. My chapters focus on juxtaposing Adichie's Americana with Jean Toomer's Cane, studying blogging and digital communication within Americana, and considering Adichie's presentation across various forms and the ways in which she creates a transmedia persona. Before delving into the specifics of my project, I'd like to provide a quick background of where this project originated. It aligns with my trajectory throughout the English major at Amherst College and expands as I became more aware of the possibilities that digital humanities might allow for. My initial foundation for thinking about a project like this started with learning about the work of former 5 College Digital Humanities fellow Liz Alexander. I engaged with Liz's work during my first semester at Amherst, and it helped to plant the seed for the possibilities of digital humanities. Transitioning to my project, I first read Americana as a first year in Professor Cobham-Sanders' course titled Childhood in African and Caribbean Literature. I quickly fell in love with the book and Adichie as an author, going on to write a final paper about her collection of short stories titled The Thing Around Your Neck. This is where my interest began, and that interest was amplified upon reading Americana for a second time in an academic setting, this time again for Professor Cobham-Sanders, but for a class titled Digital Africas. And in that Digital Africas class, we pushed against stereotypes of African literature, centralizing texts with digital elements and considering the inherent network that exists between them. So this simple switch in focus within considering Americana, choosing to focus on the unique digitality of the text, opened up myriad possibilities, and I knew then, in my sophomore year, that I would eventually use this text in a digital-based thesis. As I continued my career at Amherst, I took many classes with Professor Parham and continued to approach text with an eye for the digital, helping to make sense of these texts in new and innovative ways. The final step in the process was reading Toomer's Cane in a class with Professor Parham last semester. That class was called Toomer, Faulkner, and Morrison, and it thought about all of these authors in conversation, and that approach, thinking of authors as existing in a network, is something I wanted to model in my thesis. So after reading Cane, I noticed later on that Adichie references Cane within Americana, and this realization opened up an entire new world of possibility, and also resulted in an entire chapter of my thesis. I feel lucky to have had so many opportunities at Amherst to pursue the passions I've discovered along the way, and to be able to build a foundation of skills that left me feeling more prepared to take on a project like this. And now, with that background out of the way, I'll show you some of my work. For my first chapter, which focuses on Cane within Americana, I studied the connections between these two texts, thinking specifically about what might be possible when you put these texts in conversation with each other, and begin to think of referencing more like hyperlinking. When people say hyperlinking, many different ideas come to mind, but I mean the act of linking 2 separate media objects together in order to create one new object. Hyperlinks allow connections to be made between words on completely different pages, and I think there's great possibility in reading references as creating these connections that are intended to be explored, but do hold the possibility of going ignored. After having read Americana, both with and without understanding the reference to Cane, I was forced to reconcile both of these possibilities. I began to question what the exact function of the reference was, and how we might better understand what Adichie is attempting to do in this moment. In my argument, I settled on thinking about referencing as hyperlinking. Readers can either choose to follow the hyperlink, delving deeper into the author's world, and enjoying a more detailed understanding of what the reference entails, or they can simply continue scrolling, which is exactly what I did in my first few readings of Americana. I recognize that this is the case with reading references in general, but the need for this digital approach is made clear by the unique form that each of these works takes on. As I write about in the blogging section of my project, Americana is composed of both prose and post. Adichie weaves blog posts written by her protagonist in with the standard prose writing that composes most of the novel. With Cane, Toomer embraces a similar blended method, combining poetry, prose, and song to result in a uniquely composed narrative. Though these texts were published 90 years apart, the form of both of these novels underscores the importance of taking a digital approach, one that illustrates and helps us to make sense of the network nature of these texts. Americana is much more complicated than a surface-level reading would reveal, and in my project, I argue that the digital approach allows readers to begin to engage with all of its complexities. And this idea connects to the form I used to model this concept. For 3 of my chapters, I used an app called Twine in order to represent the connections between my ideas. I hyperlink my words within the chapter, modeling both what I hope to achieve in a discussion of referencing as hyperlinking, but also hoping to model much of Adichie's work throughout Americana and within the creation of her public persona. As I discuss in Chapter 4 of my project, Adichie creates a networked persona of herself, often repeating her words or concepts across works and forms, something that I refer to as the concept of hyperlinking herself, as she sets up connections between her words in one particular setting and allows readers to facilitate connections between her ideas across forms. Here's an image of the back-end map of what these connections look like, which is built in Twine. Twine is self-described as an open-source tool for telling interactive, non-linear stories. Through this process, I did learn some basic HTML coding in order to use Twine for my project, but luckily, with the support of the 5 College Digital Humanities team, the process wasn't too painful. One of the most important things I worked through during this project was finding ways to bring my ideas to the digital, pushing the technology to work for me in ways that I might not have originally thought of, but also learning new things and seeing new possibilities in working with this form. I found there to be so much potential in the digital, as I was granted the possibility to show rather than tell, or to tell but in enhanced ways. I spent many long hours in Professor Parham's office mapping out my ideas on paper, and then trying to figure out how the technology might correlate with those ideas. Here's a photo of one of my original maps, which is handwritten, for what I hoped the Cane chapter would look like, and here's that same handwritten map against what the resulting Twine map did look like. Thinking digitally gave me new insights into Americana and Cane, and new possibilities for thinking about my approach to these novels. I was able to do justice to ideas that would be significantly less powerful had I just told them in standard prose writing, specifically because I had the opportunity to model techniques I found within the texts. For example, one of the other important goals that using Twine helped me achieve was something I'd hoped to keep at the center of my project since the start. As I continued to sit with Americana, I found myself struck by the ways the novel holds many different themes, ideas, characters, and places. There's a line from the novel that I find to neatly sum up this particular aspect. It goes, "Why do people ask, what is it about, as if a novel had to be about only one thing?" I analyzed the text in one specific way for my course in childhood and African and Caribbean literature, but then took a completely different approach in my digital Africas class. Both readings were completely valid, but came by way of different choices at the start of the journey. I came to think of Americana as somewhat of a choose-your-own-adventure text, and wanted to keep this spirit at the heart of my project as I worked through my own analysis of the book. That's why working with Twine proved to be so fruitful. It allowed me to present my story in a non-linear way and show just how interconnected each of my thoughts actually was. Here's a video clicking through the Twine portion of my project. As you see, readers are initially asked for their name, which is a technique that centralizes reader agency at the outset of the project. They are then met with a choice at the end of each passage, and can decide which piece of the analysis they want to move on to next. With this effect, I hope that readers feel some sense of agency when they engage with my project, similar to the agency that I felt in my first few readings of Americana. And overall, this is just a quick glimpse at my thesis. And as the goal of my project is to maintain an element of interactivity, I think the project is best understood by navigating it for yourself and creating your own unique experience. For now, you can visit lauren.5calledtheage.org to engage with the aspects I have talked about, or the rest of my project, which I didn't get to today. I'd like to sincerely express my gratitude to Professor Parham, Sheila, and all of the other 5 College DH Fellows for such a great experience. And thank you to you for listening.